How goes it? Welcome to From Half Court for today, October 23rd, the opening of the NBA season. I am Sean Murphy, joined by the Marquette Heat from that beautiful seat. He is back in the United States after a multi-week trip through Asia. Troy Sergey. Troy, it's good to have you back, my friend. How are you? Are you still experiencing jet lag? Is that hitting you like a mother?
Yeah, doing well, Sean. Minorly. Just kind of sleep schedule isn't totally back to normal yet, but it's close. It's getting
Oh, I
there.
can imagine.
And yes, you're absolutely right. This is the start of the NBA opening night season this week, as far as tomorrow for the rest of the league, and then Wednesday for our Detroit. Sorry. Yeah, Wednesday for our Pistons, and then Tuesday for the rest of the league. We have some great
So close,
game.
Troy.
Yes, yeah, so close, right? We got a two-game matchup tomorrow, of course, with Boston Celtics and New York Knicks to follow in the evening game with the Timberwolves and the Lakers. That should be great. But then Wednesday, our Detroit Pistons take on the Indiana Pacers, which
Yep.
would be a great matchup to watch. It's going to be a really exciting game for me. Of course, I go to a lot of Pacers games here in Indy, but my heart is red, white, and blue with those Detroit Pistons. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot to take away from the preseason and, just what they were able to do over that 5-game stretch, as well as just, what the players were able to put together, things that we've heard now. I think we have a decent sense of, what this team can look like this season. Ultimately, we know what they want to accomplish. We know, the identity that they're trying to establish. And so I definitely want to dive in and talk about that, as well as, just expectations and what we think is a successful opening stretch to this season. Also, want to talk a little bit. As of recording, today is the deadline for rookie extensions from the 2021 Cade class, and a lot of deals are getting made at the deadline here. So, I want to talk about those and more because this is From Half Court, where we talk Detroit Pistons, but also all things NBA basketball, a little bit of WNBA basketball when there's things like the finals that just happened, things like Caitlin Clark going off and Troy living literally right down the road like a lucky mother and being able to go to those games. Anyway, if you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the content. Also, be sure you follow myself on X at Sean Half Court so that you don't miss any updates. And if you want to just see whenever Troy posts once every 2 months, go to at Troy Sergey 44. But Troy, enough about all that. Let's talk Detroit Pistons. As you mentioned, they open their season this week for the first time in about 6 months. The Pistons will be playing basketball that is consequential, basketball that counts. And I would argue for the first time in about 11 months, the Pistons feel like they're actually at the same at a place in the standings where they stand a chance. So,
yeah,
that's the beauty of the beginning of the season. Everyone's tied. But Troy, there was a lot of preseason is one of those things that can be very tricky because the leaderboards for preseason never correlate with the leaderboards, at the end of the season. Certain players don't even play at all, but it's certainly not like the NFL preseason where it means almost nothing,
right.
right? Like this isn't like football where, so many things are getting are just getting disguised. Like, players are running their sets. You're seeing largely what these teams are going to look like. And, especially if you have young teams like the Pistons, you're going to give your guys decent run, especially through
Yeah.
those first 3 quarters. And, through that, I think we saw a lot, just about, where the Pistons stand. My first impression is, I mentioned it kind of before we were recording is, just talking about, like things that impress, things that, you want to look at for improvement. Right off the bat, things that impress is just JB Bickerstaff and his staff and, just the difference of energy that this team has from last season. In addition, you're already seeing him, adjusting, experimenting with different sets, with Jaden Ivey more on the ball. You're seeing different lineup combinations. I think the big thing, is just that when you look at where this team is already going into training camp, like you're seeing those foundations of an identity already. And, the fact that you can say that through some preseason games is something that is encouraging. But Troy, you were able to watch as well. What are your thoughts after watching the 5 preseason games, or at least as much as you could watch with
Yeah.
your, circumstances over the last couple
Yeah,
weeks?
yeah. I definitely watched 3 or 4 of them, and, I think the big thing that catches me is, the veterans. I think of one guy in particular, Tobias Harris, bringing into this roster of how
Good
he's
at basketball, turns out. Who
yeah,
would have
yeah,
thought?
yeah. We kind of knew that, but he, spaces the floor very well. He's able to score very well, and I think he gets guys like Ivy and Cade going on the offensive end as well. And I think that's exactly what we wanted out of a vet like him. I certainly think Ivy seemed a little more free on the offensive end, which of course we like, and I
Mhm.
credit Coach Bickerstaff for that. And Jalen Duren, I thought, made massive improvements too. I don't know if you realize that, Sean, but on both sides of the court, he just seemed like a more mature player. And going into year 3, I think that's exactly what we wanted out of him. But number 1 on my list is definitely Tobias Harris's play, and not just his play, but how he helps his other teammates.
Yeah, I think when especially that first game in Phoenix, you just saw right away,
Mhm. Oh yeah,
essentially
boom.
that game was essentially the case point for why this roster was constructed the way it was. Like, if
Mhm.
everything is firing on all cylinders, this is what it can look like. And that was what it was in full display. Like, Cade and Tobias combined for like 49 points, I believe, and they, were playing lights out basketball. But I think the thing, that when I look at what stood out, what impressed, this preseason, it was just the level of play that we saw from Jaden Ivey. Because similar to what you said about, maturing Jalen Duren, I think that's what we're seeing thus far from Ivy as well. They're both players going into year 3. I think, if you're talking about potential breakout candidates, I would say Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey are probably the top candidates. But the thing that really stood out with me, I think Jalen Duren, I think he's improved in a lot of areas of his game that we've seen him excel in before, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Whereas I think what impressed with Jaden Ivey was, as he had the ball more in his hands, he was taking care of the ball pretty well. And on top of that, he was shooting the ball really well. And I think,
absolutely.
especially as a scorer, he just looked like he was, as comfortable as can be. If this is the Jaden Ivey that we get, during the season, I think there's a legitimate case that he could be the leading scorer for the Pistons this season.
Right,
Now,
and that's awesome to say because we knew he was a score first guard going into the
mhm,
league, right, from Purdue,
mhm,
and we've seen flashes of that, right, Sean? But
yep.
now we've really, really seen this, and my goodness, if Jaden Ivey is your leading scorer on this roster, that's a great problem to have.
Now, he's not gonna shoot 61% from the field during the season. He's definitely not gonna shoot 53% from 3 on 3.5 attempts per game, right? But if he can shoot 52% from the field, high 30s, low 40s from 3, and 80s from the free throw line, that's a that's a great stat line. That's a borderline all-star caliber stat line. And, the thing that stuck out with me, immediately was they're using Jaden Ivey a lot like they used Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland.
Mm,
And, the confidence that they have in him is a stark contrast from what we saw last season, with the coaching staff, right? And, I think the big thing is that, there's just the confidence that they're projecting, but also just a thing that you've heard, from every single person that's coached Jaden Ivey now, or even every front office, is they almost have to reel him back because he almost works too hard. Like, that's
yeah.
not something that's being made, like, that is a echoed sentiment from anyone that's ever been around Jaden Ivey. And I think, if he's able to maintain, this level of play going into the season, I think you're gonna start that or I think you're gonna start seeing that work really pay dividends.
Right, absolutely, and I just think we need that type of scoring. We know that the Pistons have struggled on the offensive end, putting the ball in the basket for a couple years now, and having a high caliber player like him that is able to go out, and this will be year 3 for him as well, not just year 3 for Duren. Right, they came in the same draft class, so the fact that he's making these improvements in year 3, I think certainly shows you why you wanted to keep this guy around and why you want him to be a core part of your roster moving forward.
I mean, Troy, I think you could legitimately say, outside of Blake Griffin, the last time the Pistons have had
Yeah,
a steady number 1 scorer
right.
is Richard Hamilton or Chauncey Billups.
That's absolutely right. You think of those seasons from 2009 to 20, my goodness, 18, you're right, until Blake Griffin. I mean, you just had a kind of an ebb and flow of guys who could score the ball, not a lot of consistency, but
Mhm.
even kind of a score first guard even was never a part of those teams. You think of a Reggie
And you
Jackson, you
had him
think
like
of
a Reggie
Stuckey,
Jackson at times. You had Brandon Jennings. Like, you had guys
but
that
not
filled
to
in
this
moments.
consistency. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, but no one with that consistency. So, the fact that the Pistons could potentially have 2 of those guys, is definitely, enticing. Now, there's a lot that was made of, of Cade's play, especially those first couple of games where, he really wasn't, filling up the score sheet, so to speak. I think the big thing when you talk about, like, a Cade Cunningham, to me, I think he's the player that in the preseason I have the least questions about. Like, I think we all know, that there's the real potential. I think what you've wanted to see, like, especially, like, specifically talking about his scoring and his offensive arsenal. Like, I have no questions that Cade can get to his spots and make things happen during the season. What I'm curious to see is how does that spacing help Cade Cunningham? And I
Mhm.
think you saw 2, just drastic examples of how this helped Cade in the preseason. The first one is he led the NBA in assists in the preseason. He was able to, convert a lot of those, potential looks that were missed last season, and those were able to, contribute because he has a Malik Beasley on the wing, a Tobias Harris, a Jaden Ivey who's hitting his shots. Like, you have those players there, even like a Simone Fontecchio. The other thing is the game in like that Tobias Harris game when he came in, that was the most space Cade Cunningham had to operate since starting in the NBA. And I would argue that's the most comfortable he's ever looked.
Right.
And so,
Absolutely.
when you have a guy like Tobias where, you know that you can't just double team Cade anymore because now you know that there are other guys that can make you pay.
Right.
And having that gravity is something that this Pistons haven't had in a long time. And when you talk about how do you help Cade elevate to the next level, how does he have an all-star caliber campaign? It's by guys helping, lift him up. And I think that's exactly what you're seeing, or I think that's exactly what you saw in moments in the preseason.
Right, right, and that's why I said, Tobias Harris's play was my biggest takeaway from the
Mhm.
season is not just his ability to score, but having our young guys improve and take the next step in their game too. And how many times have we talked about Sean over the years, even the past decades, looking at the past stars where teams weren't able to get to good players to play around them to compensate their game. But you don't get a Cade Cunningham every draft, right? But now we do have our guy that we're building around, and it's great to see that this team and organization is putting guys like Tobias Harris around him because that's only going to make his play better. And it's only going to make the team better too. Of pushing for a play-in spot in the next year or two. So we're just really happy, I think, as fans and as people who watch the team to see this team probably take the next step here. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, they certainly seem like they are poised to be heading in that direction. And, I think the other thing as well is not just, the veteran presence of a Tobias Harris, but I think you saw, right away that Malik Beasley can play.
Right,
And,
absolutely.
he whether he's someone that, they sign, in more of a long-term capacity going forward, I definitely think, if need be, he's someone that you can get, some assets for, when you're talking about like, at the trade deadline, if a contender needs to, like go and get like a wing, like that's definitely someone that would be an option. I personally would like to see him in Detroit if he does continue to play well, but again, you have options, you have flexibility. One
Yep.
guy who I don't want to say I'm full out concerned about, but I think a situation that's going to be interesting to monitor is Tim Hardaway Jr. I
Hmm.
think if you're talking about like who perhaps was, like, as far as, like, my biggest, like, I don't wanna say biggest losers, but my most underwhelming performances of the preseason when you talk about the Pistons, there's 2 names that immediately come to mind. For me, it's Tim Hardaway Jr. and it's Marcus Sasser. We'll touch on Sasser in a second, but with Beasley I mean, but with Hardaway Jr., the concern going into this year was, is his three-point shot gone? And, like, he essentially lost it during that playoff run in Dallas after coming back from injury. And he shot 11% from the three-point line this preseason, 17% from the field. And, I don't want to say that that's, like writing on the wall. We've seen guys go through shooting slumps and then immediately start out the season and things are fine. However, given the fact that this isn't necessarily a fluke, that this is something that he is coming off of, I think it's something to be concerned about and something to note. But I think Troy, with how he is a smart player and he does bring a valuable veteran presence. So I do think there is going to be some leniency to allow him to, potentially play out of that.
Right, right. And I think it's a little too early to maybe jump to massive conclusions. And I know you're not doing
No,
that at
no,
all.
I
Yeah,
not. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Right, right, right. But I think too, that was we look at before the injury, right? That was a big part of his game. That's how he made that Dallas team better, was his shooting,
That is
right?
his game.
Yeah, right. That is his game, right, right.
Like that, I think
And
that's
you
why
think
it is
of
a concern.
right, right. And you think of, how that was able to help a guy like Luka too. And now, you have a guy like Cade, at the point guard position who's we know how talented he is. And yeah, you want him to be able to shoot the ball because that is his game. So yeah, I think it's a concern, but I think it's way too early to make any final conclusions. And I know you weren't doing that. I'm not doing that, but something to keep an eye on for us.
And that's exactly what I was saying. It's something
Yeah,
you want to monitor, throughout the season. I think, like again, 5 games in the preseason, you don't want to overreact. But if you start to if it's 10 games in, 20 games in,
sure,
and he's
sure.
hovering around, 20-25% from three, that's definitely something to cause a little concern. However, I think with this roster, when you have a guy like a Simone Fontecchio,
Mhm.
who's playing as well as he is, he can definitely step in. Sar Thompson, whenever he comes into the lineup, is someone that can play there as well. I know that's someone that's causing, kind of like a lot of concern, by the way, in the Pistons community. I think the biggest thing is it's really not in the team's hands. It is solely in the leagues and the player association's hands to clear him. And the truth of the
Yep.
matter is it's just a complex injury to come back from, or a complex health thing to come back from. So when like I've said it in this podcast before, this is solely speculation. I would expect to not see a till December. And, that's just because if he hasn't even gotten to training camp yet, you would imagine that he would want to get some 5-on-5 work,
Absolutely.
ramp up. So I just think when you're being realistic, you want to play the long game here. I know fans want to see a star back on the court, but this is not something to joke around with.
No, not at all. And you need that 5-and-5, training beforehand, anyways, because of how fast paced this league is, how athletic this league is. You can't just, oh, I feel good, I'm going to jump in. It takes time. This is a very
Yeah.
much of a time, crucial matter, not just with recovery, but getting back as well. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is like, again, this is a life-threatening thing that he's coming back from.
mhm.
Like this is
Right.
this isn't just like a sprained ankle or a torn ligament. Like this is the guy had a blood clot. Like that's no joke. So, the he definitely seems, like he definitely seems like he feels good, but this is it's kind of a more complex process even than like, you see football players have to go through like concussion protocols, especially if they go through like a lot of various things, they have to clear like all these hurdles. It's almost even more complex than that. So,
Right.
um, time will tell. But Marcus Sasser, I think it's not really just the fact that it's kind of the summer league performance in compound with the preseason performance and where he is overall in the scheme of the roster. They're wanting him to be that backup point guard or to be that third point guard on the for this team. And I've said from day one, I just don't think that's Marcus Sasser's game. And especially now with a new front office, with a new coaching staff, in my opinion, I think that's why Marcus Sasser's days in Detroit are not long. And why I think if you do see the Pistons make some form of move in the next couple of months, like if it were to be before the trade deadline, it would potentially be to address point guard depth. Because in my opinion, you only really have Cade and Ivy that are playable at this current state.
Right, right, and yeah, the minutes just weren't there. This preseason, like we wanted probably him to do as fans and people who watched and covered the team. So, yeah, that's a good thought. I guess I haven't really put in a lot of thought into Marcus Sasser's future, but we know that he has game. We know that we saw flashes of that last year, but certainly, like most guys in the league with an 82 game season, Sean, consistency is the big thing. Being able to come in each and every night and play meaningful basketball. We'll have to see. We'll have to see where things are at. But yeah, the writing may be on the wall, but we're going to have to see if time will tell. So,
And the only thing that was consistent about Marcus Sasser's game was that he was never really fully comfortable when he was the one running the offense. He was the
right,
one,
right,
that was that, that floor general. And, that's not really who he was in college either. But the thing that's complex about being an off ball, scoring guard and, in this league at his size is that it's not very common. And that's
right.
just not very, very much of in my opinion, much of a tenable role. So we'll see. Time will tell what happens with Sasser. Again, I think it's really more so an overarching point that this is definitely a team that will have some struggles at guard depth. So hopefully knock on wood that that players stay healthy. But if there were to be an injury, that could be something that would get kind of tricky within the rotation. Um,
Absolutely.
we mentioned Ron Holland a little bit before. I think the biggest takeaway for me from Ron Holland's game is, obviously he as far as the athleticism, just the base intangibles, like you can see why he was a top 5 pick. But I think the biggest thing that that really showed for me this preseason was his level of competitiveness, and also just his overall, just the intangibles that he does have, like his ability to finish around the rim is, I think, something that will translate almost immediately. He's someone that if he develops can definitely be one of the better defensive wings in this league. And a Ron Holland Asar defensive duo is something that is really intriguing. He did shoot 11% from 3. He did have moments, where, he missed assignments or he made mistakes, but he's a rookie. That's bound to happen, right? I think the big thing you want to see is, is there a spot in the rotation for him or not? And I think, to start the season, I think there could be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think in a man's league, you want that competitive nature, especially with his age and the fact that he's able to do that and see that. I think that's a great, great sign moving forward. We knew the shooting, even in the G League coming into the year was going to be a struggle. So 11% isn't a super surprise, but you certainly want that to be a little bit higher, even for
Mhm.
the preseason. But yeah, his ability to finish around the rim, I thought, was probably the most impressive thing I saw about him. A close second would be just his athletic nature. I think in a league like this too, you want your young guys to be athletic, freak of nature in the athletic department. So I think that is something that I saw from him. But yeah, the intangibles I thought were there. Ability to handle the ball too. I thought for a 2 was good. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see again in the rotation. I think to start the season, like always, I think you can at least make a great argument for 10 15 minutes a night to start the
Mhm.
season. How that translates after game 20 or 25, that'll be all up to how the first 20 games went, right? How
Right.
what we see out of him and how he's able to score the ball, how defensive assignments goes,
Based
because we
solely
also
on performance.
right. We also know, when you have guys, in there, I don't know, sixth, seventh, eighth season, right? And we know how deep this league is with guys who are able to score the ball, and especially at that 2 position. It'll be interesting to see how he's able to guard against some of those top players in the league, who are a lot older than him. But yeah, only time will tell with him. But I think the little bit that we saw, I think there's a lot to like.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I think the big thing is you saw that, you saw the level of competition that, these guys were able to, put forth. You saw that, that this coaching staff clearly, has brought a different energy and joy to this team that just wasn't there last season. And, I think especially the big thing is you're definitely seeing the foundations of what Detroit basketball, you know, needs to look like in the modern NBA,
Right.
right? But
Right.
the big thing is, we talk about, just how this team's going to be tested early and very, very vigorously. And, that might be an understatement, Troy. Are you ready for their first 5 games?
Yeah, let's hear it, Sean.
All right. So they start their season at home on Wednesday against the Indiana Pacers. the team that made the Eastern Conference Finals. They then go to Cleveland on the 25th, and which is the beginning of a two-night back-to-back where they go home and face the Boston Celtics, and then they also go at Miami, at Philadelphia. So you are playing quite literally the class of the Eastern Conference and arguably of the NBA to start the season. So, not saying that you base the entirety of this season on how these first 5 games go, but I think we're going to see a very, very good litmus test
Yeah.
that tells us exactly how good this team is day one and where they need to grow going forward.
Right, right. Especially those first 3 games, I think of Indiana, Cleveland, and Boston. We can steal one of those games. I think that would be a success. 2 would be phenomenal. But this is a team that you're right. There are some question marks of how well they can play against the best in the league, because this is, in some ways, a lot of ways, a different roster with bringing in a Tobias Harris and improvements on the guys we've already talked about. Totally new coaching staff. So it's exciting to see where this team stands, as you mentioned, but we will sure find out quickly when maybe that's not the case for some other teams,
How do
but
you
we'll
think
find
they
out
match
pretty
up?
quickly.
How do you
Say
think
that.
they match up?
Yeah, I think they match up fine in some ways. I think Tobias Harris really, really does help. I also, I worry about the stars. I worry about how you contain a Tyrese Halliburton and, Miles Turner pick and roll. I kind of worry about how you contain Donovan Mitchell when he's made back-to-back three-pointers, right? That third offensive possession, what do you do? I worry how you can contain a Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. But
It's
I
literally a
will.
pick your poison with Boston, man. All 5
Right,
guys on the
right.
court.
So with that being said, it sounds like I'm saying they match up horrible, but I'm not. I think this team is certainly better than last year on the defensive end in all areas. So you're going to watch definitely a more competitive basketball than you've seen last season, and probably even the year before that too. So I think of some of the close competitive games that the Pistons played. Totally different roster, but they played in 2020 and 2021. Sorry, 2021 and 2022, there were some pretty competitive games, some games that we were not projected to win that we did win. We played some high competitive basketball there, so I hope to go back to those days of high competitive basketball against some of the best in the league. But only time will tell, Sean. But I certainly think that there can be some potential to play some good matchups there. So
Yeah, I think when you look at, how they, match up against these rosters in particular, I think, with Indiana, the big test is going to be just if they can keep up with the pace and, their overall, just because really the big thing is with Indiana is just they score often and they score quickly.
right,
And, they just, with Tyrese Halliburton, he's looking to push the pace. They're not an elite defensive team. So, the Pistons can certainly, hang, with them as well. But I think the big thing is if you get stuck playing Indiana's game, you're going to
right,
lose that game 8
yeah,
times out of 10. So,
right,
if the
right,
Pistons can keep it relatively low scoring, that would definitely favor them, and I think Cleveland is going to be, just a great test of our, of their overall, toughness, and especially, just the, just how good this, this big rotation is because you're going up against the, the best of the best in that department, if
right.
not some of the best. So, yeah, definitely a lot of intriguing matchups down the pipeline for the Pistons, and it doesn't get any easier after that because then they play the Knicks, they play the Lakers, they play they have all sorts of just difficult matchups. But again, we've talked about this before. That's the NBA. All 30 teams, are a difficult matchup night in, night out. But Troy, I do want to get on to some of the breaking news that is going on as of recording this podcast. Just all of the different deals, all of the rookies that are getting extended
Let's hear it.
throughout the league. So, first, let's start with the Houston Rockets. Troy, if I were to have told you during the draft in 2021 that Alperen Şengün would end up with a higher contract than Jalen Green, would you have believed me?
I would not have, but I believe you in 2024 because my goodness, he played some very high quality basketball this past season on both
Mhm.
ends of the court, and he really show that he's a very valuable asset to that Houston Rockets team and to the whole
Yeah.
league.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those it's one of those situations that, it's just been fascinating to see, how it's carried out, and the way that they structured these extensions. It's only going to get even more interesting because Alperen Şengün has agreed to a 5-year, $185 million rookie extension, which is the rookie max extension. He also has a player option on the last year, so think of it as a 4+1.
Sure, sure.
Jalen Green signed a 3-year, $106 million contract with a option on the third season. So,
Okay,
for all
okay,
intents and purposes, Troy, Jalen Green signed a 2-year contract with the
right.
ability to renegotiate in 2 years. Jalen
Sure.
Green got a prove it deal,
Yeah,
which I think is very interesting. Obviously, it's a bet on himself. And, I think obviously if you're going to say as Houston with all these players you're going to have to, renegotiate with,
right.
of the two, I would definitely, give Şengün that extension. But
Absolutely.
but it is, it is interesting to see, if this is a dynamic, that could potentially, get interesting in Houston over the next couple of years. As you digest this, Troy, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. My initial thoughts are certainly, looking at the past 3 seasons going into year 4 with Jalen Green. We saw the talent. The talent is 100% there. We've seen some great games out of him on the offensive end, but does he impact his team with winning basketball? His presence on the defensive end of the defensive end of things. There's some question marks still there, and with Segun, seeing how his ability to not only score the ball but play very, very high quality, defense down low. I just think he's your guy moving forward. I guess I'm not really surprised by either. I think with how this Houston Rockets roster is constructed, I think it's a fair bet to make a deal where you're betting on yourself with a guy like a Jalen Green, because we know that
Mhm.
certainly a year 4 is a great opportunity for him to take another leap in his game, right? We could be watching a Jalen Green really, really excel this season, but we could also watch him digress in his game, right? Play the exact same he did last year, or maybe even to take a step below. There's a lot of question marks still around Jalen Green. So I'm not surprised by this deal at all. But I guess with his talent, you don't want to just, not extend him at all, right? You certainly want to make that bet. And, I think a 3-year, you said 106, or sorry, 2 year, 2 year,
3-year, 106. Yeah,
yeah,
2
3 year,
years with a
106.
third year option.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think that's exactly the deal that you would want with a guy like a Jalen Green. So I'm not too surprised by either.
yeah, I definitely think, just based off of, previous performance, this is, I definitely think Houston, went about this, as good of a way as possible. I mean, especially with, with a Jalen Green, you're able to, get him a contract where he is able to, increase his, his earnings and, get up there, with some of the other players in his class, but also it leaves the window open for flexibility. If guys like an Amen Thompson were to take that leap, if guys like Cam Whitmore
Exactly.
were to jump another level, you're in a situation where you don't necessarily have to bring back a Jalen Green, but also, if Jalen goes out and turns into the player that we all, know is, potentially there, then you're more than happy to sign him to that type of big money deal. Now, the one problem would be is that he'll be an unrestricted free agent a lot sooner than other people in his class. And, if he does play well and he decides to take his talents elsewhere, that's a window you open. But at the same time,
Exactly.
I don't think you pay the max just because of that,
Oh,
right? So
no, no.
I think Houston is, to me, one of the most intriguing teams of the league this year as far as what potential jumps they could take. I don't think it's even far, to say that they could potentially host they could potentially host, like, like a playoff game and a playoff series. Like, they could potentially be, I think they could potentially even be better than a 7th seed. They could be the 6th seed in the West this year, and I wouldn't be shocked. So,
Right.
Alperen Şengün is one of the most intriguing prospects as well. And so, I think especially with his level of play, and like you said, is the amount he's been able to grow as a defensive center in such a short amount of time is why I think you're comfortable giving him that money.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I think you explained it well. You explained it
mhm,
well. Yeah, you definitely don't want to give the max right away to a guy like him. So
mhm, yeah,
you
another
want options
extension.
options with a team like Houston. So
Mhm. Another extension that was made today by another competitive team that is young. The Orlando Magic have come to an agreement with Jalen Suggs on a 5-year, $150 million deal. So he is getting a $30 million per year extension. He was a all defensive team member this last season. So like when you talk about one of the best defensive guards of basketball, Jalen Suggs has certainly put himself in that category. Troy, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. My initial thoughts are I love the deal. He's great he's great for the culture in Orlando, and they're only, on the ascension. I think he's someone that, still has a lot of areas to grow in his game. Specifically, I know he's more, technically of a shooting guard, but I think if he can improve as more of a franchise point guard that can run the offense, that can facilitate things, and also if he can become, like a better 3-point shooter, especially, like he was about 40% last season, but during the playoffs, it really took a dip. So, I think that's just something that the entire team needs is, just better scoring all around. But Troy, your reaction to 3 years, $150 million for Jalen Suggs.
yeah, I like the deal. I don't love the deal because I think that their Magic are still kind of doing a little bit of a gamble with it because of the
Mhm.
improvements that we do need to see from him on the offensive end. The defense, yes, it's great, but you're right. In this league, you need to be able to shoot the ball, and we've seen a little bit of flashes of that. We've seen him, facilitate the offense fairly well at times, but I still think it's a kind of a gamble. But if you're an Orlando Magic team, on the other hand, can you afford to make a gamble like that with a guy like Suggs? I think you can. That's why I
Yeah.
do like the deal, but I do want to. I want to throw out the word gamble there because that I do see that that's something that. Is kind of going on here, but like you
Yeah.
said, with the flexibility and the talent that this Magic roster has, you can make that gamble.
Yeah, I think of the type of players to make this bet on, I think he is that guy. Especially, when you look at how much he's grown from year 1 to now, it's just it's drastic. He was, as a rookie, people were talking about Jalen Suggs as a bust, and I don't think anybody would be having those conversations today, especially after the season that they just had. I think playing alongside, like a Contavious Caldwell Pope is going to be really beneficial for him and for Paulo and for the rest of that team. And you're talking about a guy who's only 23 years old, who has comes from Gonzaga, a winning program. Is just been has won at every level he's been at thus far, and they're at the cusp of really doing something special there. And I think it definitely could have been for more. So I think from that standpoint, I think you got decent value overall. But like you said, they are making a bet that he is going to be one of the franchise cornerstones. And as great as he was defensively, what makes a Derek White and a Drew Holiday elite is they give you that productivity on both sides of the court at that
Bingo.
consistency.
Yeah, and
And
those are two guys that I think are a good comparison of what we'd want out of him. But go ahead.
yeah, I think a Drew Holiday is absolutely attainable out of Jalen Suggs. And if he becomes 80% of what Drew Holiday is, I think that's a great contract.
Sure.
So I think defensively, he's already pretty much at the Drew Holiday level. I think it's really just the offensive side, just getting that figured out. Now, some other fascinating deals, Troy, that have been made throughout the league. Let's talk about one that was not made. Jonathan Kuminga and the Warriors will not reach a deal ahead of the deadline. Kuminga is someone that is looking to have a breakout season as a cornerstone piece for this Warriors team. Um, they did sign Moses Moody to a 3-year, $39 million exception. So essentially, kind of think of like a mid-level exception. Um, Definitely more of a, like that one makes sense because Moody is kind of who he is. He's more of a role player, whereas Jonathan Kuminga is someone who, there's flashes of all-star potential, but it's kind of figuring out exactly how good he is. Troy, I think this makes a lot of sense on the side of the Warriors because this is a guy that I could see going multiple different ways. And I just don't think we've seen enough to this point to fully justify a maximum contract. And when you're looking at the Warriors, they already have the biggest payroll in basketball. So it makes sense that they want to put this off for another year.
Right, right. The flashes are there. The talent is there at times. We've seen them last season. But you're right. I think the biggest thing that you mentioned was the payroll of the Warriors already. I mean, I don't know if they're in a position to sign, and commit long term to a guy like Kuminga, which makes sense. And
At least
also I
they
think
need to at least they need to move some things around first in order to be
right.
able to do so.
And not just move things around, but see where this roster is at. I think
Mhm.
even 20 or 30 games into the season, too. There's a lot of question marks on this Warriors team.
Yep.
So I think it makes sense to not commit long term with Kuminga. But certainly that doesn't go against Kuminga because we know at times, we've seen great flashes from him
Yeah.
throughout the past couple of seasons.
I
So.
mean, I think he's probably their second best player.
Which is crazy to say, but at this
Mhm.
point, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and he's going to have to be consistently this season in order to get that deal because nothing against a Draymond Green, that's just not who he is at the stage of his career. He's
And
never going to be
he's
that.
aging.
Yeah, he's never going to be that offensively. Ever since Andrew Wiggins went through the stuff with his family and took that leave of absence, he has not been the same player ever since he's come back. So what are they going to get out of him? Buddy Hield is a guy that everyone says they want on their team, but then the second they have him, no longer want him on their team. So what's exactly going to be his his contributions there? There's a lot of question marks, and so especially when you talk about you already you have Steph signed through next season. You're going to probably already start talking about an extension with him. You have all this money tied to Draymond through 2026, 2027. Again, there's a lot of things that they have to have defined, and I think the big thing is this is the year for Jonathan Kuminga to come out and show, are you a max player or not? And
Yep.
from draft day, we all knew that potential was there and that this was a great landing spot. So I have no questions that he can go out and do that this season. But I think for the Warriors, it was shrewd to not make that commitment day one.
Right, right. Yeah, the best words that we have for advice with him is prove it, Kuminga. Right,
Mhm,
prove your talent this season. This is the
mhm.
perfect season to do it. So,
Now, Troy, this one's a little shocking to me, and I fully acknowledge that I just haven't seen this that I haven't seen this guy play a ton of basketball. But I know that this is someone that's widely regarded as, as a special talent. The Atlanta Hawks have paid Jalen Johnson 5 years, $150 million extension with the franchise. So, you talk about, a guy that's probably along with Reese Shea, their best young prospect. But for a team that's, like the Hawks, they're still just so confusing to me because they're not quite rebuilding, but also they're extremely expensive, but they have all these players that are kind of rebuilding pieces, kind of young pieces. So I almost wonder if this signals that they're going to have to make a trade soon, just financially. But, Troy, what do you think of this deal? And, have you seen a whole lot of Jalen Johnson? And, do you think this makes sense?
yeah, I have watched a lot of Jalen Johnson last season, and I do think it makes sense to make a deal with him. But 5 years to me is a little too long of a commitment with how many question marks this Atlanta roster has, especially bringing in a guy like Ricochet, number one overall pick. Um, but I think a 3 year deal would have made a little more sense than a 5 year deal. But the talent is there. I mean, this
Yeah.
guy on both ends of the court, great defender. He's all over the place on the offensive end. I mean, the guy can score the ball, great intangibles, able to really score the ball well around the rim, able to assist the ball. I mean, he plays great defense. He rebounds well. He steals. He truly, as far as the stat line, he does
He's
it all.
versatile.
Yeah, oh, very versatile. But I think with the Atlanta Hawks of what this roster looks like, what kind of basketball they're trying to play this season, what's Trae Young's future with this team? They got rid of DeJounte Murray this summer. I I personally would not go 5 years. I would do more like a 3-year deal with him.
Yeah, and I think the thing is just in the modern NBA that, if you come back with a 3 or 4-year deal with that type of guy and his talent and his skill set, I think he has the leverage to make his own path to get that 5 years. So,
Right,
I
right. In
you
my
almost
opinion,
have to if you're Atlanta.
right. You think that he's going to make some big jumps. You hope, but you don't know. So in some ways, just like Suggs, I would throw out the word gamble with that too. So
Mhm. And, I think again, if you're talking about the type of players to take that risk with, I think the Jalen Johnsons of the world make a ton of sense. To me, the Atlanta Hawks, the X factor to me of where this franchise, goes going forward. Trae Young's no longer the franchise player in Atlanta. The franchise players in Atlanta are Jalen Johnson and Zachary Ricochet. And I think Ricochet, it was interesting to watch him in the preseason. There's, you certainly see why he was a number one pick. There's a lot to like, about, his game and the flashes that he has. I still have no idea how good he will be, if at all. I still have no idea how much he will play, at the beginning. I imagine, I mean, he's the number one pick, so he has to be in the rotation. But, it's just when you talk about Atlanta, I mean, it's just their books say that they're one thing and their roster construction says another. You know what I mean? They're paying Trae Young $43 million. You're paying Clint Capella and DeAndre Hunter about $21 million each. You got Bogdan Bogdanovich at about 17 million. Like, this is a team that their payroll this season is going to be at $169 million. And Troy, I don't think this team, like the salary cap is 140. So I don't think this team is good enough to be almost $30 million over the salary cap.
right.
So when I think about potential trade partners for Detroit, I look at Atlanta.
Yeah.
I'm serious. I look at Atlanta. I look at Chicago. I look at all these teams that are kind of middling, that are bloated, that need to make a decision of who the are we, and are we going to go for a Cooper Flag? Because I have news for you, Troy. A lot of teams. I'm not sure if you saw him play it all the other night. A lot
Yep.
of teams are going for Cooper Flag this
Yeah,
year.
smooth, just a smooth score, and that's
They're planting
exactly
their
what.
flag for Cooper Flag, Troy.
Yeah, that's exactly what this modern NBA needs more of is more Cooper Flags to help teams. And my goodness, does GMs probably are drooling over him. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. So, and again, you talk about Atlanta. What a terrible year to get that number one overall pick. It's which is a messed up thing to say because any time is a great time to get the number one pick. But we all know there's a little bit of a difference between a Zachary Ricochet and a Cooper Flag. There just is.
yep, yep,
So,
absolutely. And the year before that, Victor Wembanyama. We're gonna have to talk about him all season long too, which I'm
oh
looking
yeah,
forward to.
I
So
I think if he plays this season, I think it's a lock that he's the defensive player of the year.
yeah,
A
I,
lock.
I do too. I do too.
One more player that was extended today, Troy. Trey Murphy of the New Orleans Pelicans has
Yep.
agreed on a 4-year, $112 million rookie extension. No options, no incentives, just a straight 4-year, $112 million deal. He's probably one of the best young prospects that the Pelicans have. I think, again, he's one of their best role players, and he's a really good 3-point shooter, solid defensive player. When you look at the type of players that Trajan Langdon goes for, you almost like draw an image of Trey Murphy. The thing that again, the thing that's going to tell us where this roster is Zion. He looks the healthiest and the best he has since his year at Duke. So that's exciting. But you brought up his name a minute ago, DeJounte Murray. How does he fit within this system? And can he actually impact winning? Because I mean, I'm telling you, man, if you're the Atlanta Hawks, like, you don't really feel like you got a whole lot of that out of that experiment. And by the way, something we didn't mention about the Hawks a minute ago, Troy, they're gonna have to start paying. They haven't even started compensating for their picks yet for the DeJounte Murray trade. So DeJounte is already gone, and they don't own their first round pick this year.
Yeah, that's a little scary. It's a little scary going into, but Murphy. Kind of talking about him a little bit. He's a guy too that a lot of we know the talent's there, similar to Johnson, just that young, versatile player. Is able to play both ends of the court very well. Probably not the talent quite that Johnson has, Jalen Johnson,
Mhm.
but I think he's a guy that is worth betting on because we know again the versatility is there, and I think there's still question marks in New Orleans' future. So I'm not too surprised by that
Yeah,
extension.
I mean, he's been a high 30s, low 40s three-point shooter since coming into the league. He has insane length. He's been, he's been pretty dang durable. He played, he did only play 57 last year, but he played 79 of 82 in the 2022-23 season, and 62 games in the 21-22 season. So I think there's, just a lot of reason to be intrigued by what's going on in New Orleans. And I think to your point, I think like a Jalen Johnson I think he has a higher overall ceiling. I would make the argument that Trey Murphy probably has a higher floor. Like he's a more, what you were getting out of you know what you were getting out of um Trey Murphy. And what you're getting is a pretty darn good role player.
Yeah,
So
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah,
He's gonna
but
play.
Troy, I mean, that's pretty much the extensions that that we've seen today. Obviously, guys like Cade and Evan Mobley, were already locked down,
Yeah, and
before this point.
Franz Wagner too, right?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
yep. Franz Wagner got signed to a maximum extension as well. So, overall, I think one thing that we can say for certain, just looking back on this rookie class, is it was a or on that 2021 class. It's a pretty dang good one.
Yeah,
And
we knew that too. We knew it would be a good one.
I don't know if we're gonna view it in the same light as, like I don't think anything will ever stack up to the 2003 class, but I think that when we talk about best rookie classes of the last 20 years, I think this is certainly in the conversation. And I think that, I think that 2023 class is going to be in that conversation as well. The Victor Wembanyama class.
Mhm,
So,
mhm, mhm.
it's just the talent in this league is only getting deeper and deeper, and I think today was a pretty big sign of that.
Yeah, yeah, and
So
not just with Cooper Flag, but 2025 class looks
mhm.
interesting too. So we'll have to see how things play out with that.
So real quick, Pistons news also broke.
Yes.
Um, I mean, not really big news because this is kind of we saw this coming, but still interesting nonetheless. The Pistons have exercised the fourth year options on Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. So they extended them through next season, picked up those options, and the third year options for Sar Thompson and Marcus Sasser. So they did guarantee the next years for all four of those players. So uh, they will be in Detroit for the foreseeable future.
And that's exciting because we love those guys and we know they're talented and we know that they're making big leaps. So
Yeah, nope, certainly a lot of potential there. But yeah, definitely a lot of interesting basketball to come down the pipeline. Troy, this is the one of the best weeks of the year. We have a lot of really interesting hoops coming down the pipeline. Before we end the podcast, I would be remiss if we didn't talk at least a little bit about the WNBA Finals, Game 5, and everything that just went down with that. Troy, I'm not sure if you saw, but the Minnesota Lynx head coach pretty vehemently came out after the game and said that was stolen from us. That foul against Brianna Stewart that was called, in the final seconds that they challenged was blown. Another thing that when you go back and watch the replay as well is that there's a pretty clear travel before the foul too. The Liberty, obviously, I don't want to take away anything from their championship. They deserved it. They're, one of the best teams in basketball. But Troy, it's not very often you see a team shoot 30% from the field and clinch a championship in that game.
right, right, and we know that their duo of Sabrina Ionescu and Brianna Stewart really struggled that first half, and my goodness,
Mightily.
I think when you look at a series that's a 5 game series versus a 7 game series, you're able to adjust. You're not able to adjust as quicker as I think you are in a game 7 as far as containing stars. Normally, you don't see
You don't have the time to adjust.
you
You
don't you
like
don't
you
have
like
that time. Right. But somehow, some way, the Minnesota Lynx did adjust. I thought, at least again in that first half, very well. We were not. I was not expected to see those two struggle the way that they were that first half, and Minnesota just jumped on them so quick. So yeah, I mean, that second half, it was their game to lose, and I always struggle in any sport with a coach. Looking at one specific play and saying we lost because of this one play when you also have a full game to play. And, the Minnesota Lynx made a lot of errors in that second half. And, I'm not one to ever say that one play, but you're right. I did see that travel that wasn't called. And that's, certainly unfortunate. We think of, as a Pistons fan, that 1987 NBA Finals against the Lakers in Game 7. Bill Laimbeer goes up, right, against Kareem and does not touch him, but they call it for a foul. But Bill Laimbeer got away with many fouls that series that wasn't called. So, it's one of those things where it's like, in this moment, at this time, this is when you're going to blow your whistle. Or I guess in the Lynx case, this is a time where you do not blow the whistle. It's certainly unfortunate to them, but you're right, Sean. This New York Liberty team played great all season long. This Minnesota Lynx team played great all season long. So it's unfortunate one team had to lose, but certainly happy for them to win their first championship and to do it on their home court. It's great. Go ahead.
And it's just, you don't want to see, the closing moments of a season of a championship be decided by a whistle, or the whistle to be
Correct.
that integral in,
Right.
in the result. And I think the other thing you look at as well is just the disparity, in the fouls. Like, there was almost a 20 free throw attempt difference in, between these two teams. Like the amount that, the Liberty were able to get to the line and were able to, take advantage of that was very real. And so, I don't want to say that, that the refs cost the Lynx the championship, because, there was still overtime to be played, and the Liberty did come out and outplay them in
Draw.
that 5-minute overtime. But at the same time, it's pretty clear through replay that overtime should not have happened. And I think the thing that the Lynx fans will absolutely not want to hear today, but this is 100% the truth. This is a really good thing for the WNBA, because you know what it is, Troy? It's
What is it?
headlines. It's
Yeah.
controversy.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
talking about we're and you know what the biggest thing is? It's perhaps the first time all season that the WNBA made headlines for the basketball product, not for racism, not for politics, not for like players' looks or the things that are being shouted or the joke or the mockery that people are making. It is, people are talking about the basketball and
Yeah.
about the officiating and about, and for the WNBA, that's a really good thing.
Right, right.
It
That you
creates
stole the
intrigue.
question. Yeah, you stole the question out of me. I was going to ask Sean, does this hurt the league? Do people not want to watch the league anymore because of a bad call? And I think the answer is no. I think people are more intrigued by the league. People want to follow it more. And we
Mhm.
had a great season. And what better time to be a WNBA fan than the season where we saw an Angel Reese and a Caitlin Clark really take awesome leaps in their rookie seasons to be staples for the years to come.
Yep.
But not just the rooks, but seeing ladies like Sabrina Nescu, Kelsey Plum, Asia Wilson, the season that she had.
Yep.
There's
Brianna
just a
Stewart.
lot to be excited about in that league as well.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, and the really cool thing about women's basketball is, this is a league that, they don't just compete in the WNBA. Like, namely, Brianna Stewart has her league, Unrivaled, that will be starting in January, where so it'll be interesting to see how many of the top stars in the game are going to participate. Angel Reese did confirm that she will be playing in Unrivaled. I would imagine that you'll see other players. If they got Caitlin Clark, that would be huge.
Mhm.
But I just think that you're going to see, just the game, the women's game just continue to elevate. And again, this finals was proof that the women's game is legit and it's here to stay. And
Yeah.
the other thing as well is they were generating big ratings, and Caitlin Clark wasn't even in the picture.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah.
the Caitlin Clark effect is real, but these women deserve the attention too, and they're getting it, and I'm happy for them in that sense. Wish it wasn't about the officiating, but I'm glad it's about basketball for a change.
Right, that's right, and it's amazing. Game 5, which is essentially in our minds a game 7, right? That was played on Sunday night, and then we have opening night on Tuesday. So today, as of we're recording Monday, is the only day we're without pro basketball. So
Yep,
I
and
can
we
do
get
24 hours.
yeah, exactly. We could do 24 hours. We got some Monday Night Football that will get us through, that final evening. So, I think we're gonna be okay, Troy. Knock on wood. But we are just about here. And I mean, again, you talk about an opening slate. You get Boston, New York, and then LA and Minnesota. I think it's about as good of a doubleheader you can get night one as you can get.
Yeah.
So
Oh my goodness. And yeah, I mean, we haven't even touched on the Lakers today. We have in previous podcasts. But that's going to be very, very interesting with JJ Redick's opening night as a debut as a coach, and of course the headlines surrounding Bronny and LeBron. Right? What's AD going to look like? But also, this Minnesota
yeah.
Timberwolves team is not the team that we saw last season as far as roster construction. We don't have a cat
Yep.
anymore. How big is that going to play into it? And of course, we know the story headlines with New York and getting Cat and getting, of course, Mikal Bridges in the offseason. And, Boston was the champion, so they're going to be trying to repeat. So, yeah, all 4 teams, there's going to be great, exciting things to watch from them. So,
Mhm. Yep, absolutely. It's gonna be fun to watch. But speaking of fun, this is another fun episode. Thank you for being here today, Troy, and thank you for listening and joining us here. If you like that, be sure to like the video down below and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content we have going on. But thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe.